Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Project Inspire Chizuk Shir. And we are living during extraordinary times. Never in history has there been a magefa Apologize, technical difficulties. So we are living during extraordinary times when there has been a magefa, an epidemic that has spanned the entire world that has never happened before. And as maminim, b'nei maminim, we have to do a cheshbon hanefesh. Ma asa lanu Hashem. Nothing in this world is random. What lessons can we learn from this very difficult nisayon? What changes can we make in our lives? I listened today to a brilliant shir given by Rabbi Ephraim Waxman Shlita. I strongly recommend that everyone listen to his divrei musar and machshava. There is so much emes there and insights into the messages that we must take away from this painful nisayon. I would like to suggest that perhaps one of the lessons that we could take from this nisayon lies in the area of chinuch habanim v'habanos. We are now forced to spend all of our time 24/7 with our children. It is therefore incumbent upon us to improve our own chinuch skills. And perhaps that's the lesson or one of the lessons that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending us. So over the last 30 years, I have had the schus to visit on an ongoing basis over 400 yeshivos and Beis Yaakovs and day schools across the United States and Canada and England, and to present hashkafa shiurim, bli ayin hara, to over 300,000 students. These experiences have highlighted for me the indisputable fact that our chinuch system has been extraordinarily successful, and it has produced and continues to produce tens of thousands of B'nai Torah and B'nos Torah who love Hashem and love Torah and love Yiddishkeit. Yet I and many others have also come to the painful realization that many of our children are struggling with the most basic issues of Yiddishkeit, frumkeit, and the recognition of the truth and the beauty of Yiddishkeit. And it is becoming increasingly difficult to produce inspired kids who feel close to Hashem, who love Torah, who love Klal Yisrael, love mitzvahs, who simply love being from Jews. And I became aware of the magnitude of this problem upon hearing the responses to a question that I pose to these 300,000 yeshiva and Beis Yaakov high school students. I simply asked them, what will you respond when a non-religious Jew sitting next to you on an airplane or a train or a bus politely asks you, why are you shomer Torah and mitzvahs? Why are you from? And the overwhelming majority of these 300,000 kids had tremendous difficulty articulating a passionate, coherent, and correct answer to this question. So let's be clear. They were unable to effectively and confidently answer the most important question of their lives. So I ask, how can we then expect our children and our students to have a meaningful, authentic, inspiring, and close relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Torah and Yiddishkeit? How can anyone have a relationship with anybody or anything if they are not capable of articulating the benefits and the reasons for creating and sustaining this relationship? Rabbi, there is an ongoing war taking place in our children's lives. The Satan is attacking our children's neshamos, and he is armed with nuclear weapons. When we grew up in the 60s, the Yetzer Hara had conventional weapons, bullets, once a year a hand grenade. Today's Yetzer Hara has nuclear and biological weapons at his disposal. And if our children are going to do battle with today's Yetzer Hara without a powerful and a deep recognition of the truth and the godless and the sweetness of Yiddishkeit, then they will be rendered vulnerable. They will not be adequately armed and protected for this lifelong battle. So my experience has been over the last 30 years, and my experience tells me that we can indeed arm and protect our children and raise from inspired kids, but only if we provide them with the three amudei hachinuch, the unshakable realization of three things. Our children have to recognize, number one, that they have a Torah's Chaim, that the Torah is, a Torah's emes, that the Torah is true. That's number one. The second amud that they have to realize is that they have a Torah's Chaim, which means instructions for living, that they have the most beautiful and spectacular way of life that could possibly exist on this earth. And number three, the third amud, is that our children must self-identify with the Jewish people, with Am Yisrael. They have to recognize that we are the Am HaNivchar, that we are the greatest nation ever to exist on this planet. And it is these three amudei hachinuch that will protect our children and us for the inevitable nisyonos and battles that they will confront throughout their life. So tonight, we're going to explore a little bit the first amud, Torah's emes. Mirza Hashem, next Tuesday, we will do the other two amudim, the Torah's Chaim, and that we belong to the Am HaNivchar. So let's go through it. The first amud, that we have a Torah's emes, means that our children must be capable of articulating to themselves and to others that they know that the Torah is emes, that 3,332 years ago, HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared before millions of our grandparents and gave them the Torah Shebiksav with the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the implications of that are, therefore, despite any pain they may have in their lives, and despite any past pain that they experience, the Torah and mitzvahs remain true, still remain true and obligatory. This Amud Rishon, this Amud of Torah's emes, parents and teachers must educate themselves, and they must acquire the skills to effectively explain to our children the Yesodei Amunah, the fundamentals of Yiddishkeit. And we're not referring here to the Moreh Nevuchim, to learning the Moreh Nevuchim, or treating or teaching it. We're talking about the basic classical hashkafa issues that are dealt with decisively in the Sifrei Rishonim, Achrayim, and the Svarim of today's Gedolim. It's the Aleph Beis of Yiddishkeit. Why did Hashem create this world? Why did he give us a Torah? What's in it for him? How do we know that it's true? Won't it be extremely difficult to teach and inspire our children to love Yiddishkeit if we cannot answer these basic questions in the correct and satisfying way? The Sefer HaChinuch is a sefer that was written by a Rishon around 1,000 years ago, before cell phones, before videos, before all the alluring taivas that the Yetzer Hara dangles in front of our children's eyes these days. And the Sefer HaChinuch wrote a sefer that explains the Taryag mitzvahs. He goes through all 613, explains each one, the psukim and the halachas, and then he explains the reasons for the mitzvahs, for each mitzvah. And when we come across mitzvah Kuf Yud Zayin, mitzvah 117, Shalol lahakriv sa'ar odovash, that we are forbidden to pour honey, dvash, on the mizbeach, on the altar, in the temple. Says the Sefer HaChinuch 1,000 years ago, Shirashem mitzvah zu ne'elamim ma'od. The reasons for this mitzvah, why Hashem does not want us to pour honey on the Mizbeach, are very hidden, he writes. And I'll translate from the Hebrew to the English now, from the Lashon HaKodesh. And he writes, however, we must tell our children two things, he writes. We must tell, he really doesn't write children, it's really teenagers. We must let our children know that the mitzvos have ta'amim v'so'alos. Two different things we have to teach them. One is the reason, the ta'amim. Two is the so'alos, the benefits. It's a completely different skill set. We have to show our children how all the mitzvahs, each one, the reasons for them, and what are the benefits, why it's good for them to do the mitzvah. And then says the Sefer HaChinuch 1,000 years ago, because if we do not teach these two things and use these two approaches in giving over Yiddishkeit to our children, he says they're going to kick them away in their teenage years and they will go off the derech. This is what the Chinuch says. So when our child is going to become bar mitzvah, the father explains to his child, number one, here is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to put on tefillin. Number two, here's the benefit. Here's why it's good for us. Here's why we benefit from it. My daughter, the mother should be able to say, this is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to dress. This is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to dress tzniistic. Number two, here are the benefits. It's a different skill set. And this is something that we are told over 1,000 years ago by the Sefer HaChinuch that we must do, because if we don't, our children will go off the derech. This is what the Sefer HaChinuch says. So, I want to share with you the Torah's emes. When I go into schools or when we do kiruv seminars, it all comes back to Har Sinai, to Maimed Har Sinai. And I'll tell you a story, a true story. Many years ago, at least 20 years ago, I was invited to speak in Princeton University. Rabbi Mechanic was invited to give a lecture in Princeton University, an Ivy League college. What was taking place there? There was a course being given in Princeton called Comparative Religion, where a professor got in a room together with 50 students and they did research on 5 different religions, compared them. This believes this believes that, and then they had a final. So let me give you the details. The professor was a Gentile, a 60-year-old man, a Gentile. And he looked like not like a typical professor. He had a ponytail. He was wearing his, jeans. And I come into this class, this is the professor. He had 2 PhDs in philosophy, and he was making $150,000 a year. This is the professor. Who were the 50 students? 49 Gentiles and 1 Jewish kid named Stephen, a 19-year-old boy who knew nothing about Yiddishkeit. What were the 5 religions they were doing research on? Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hare Krishna, and the Mormons. For those of you who don't know, Hare Krishna is a cult. There's about 10 million of them, mostly in Europe they live. And then there's the Mormons. I'm sure most of us have heard of the Mormons. This is a religion where they live in Utah, and they have a very strange minhag. It's called polygamy, where the men have many wives. And what's the problem with men having many wives? It means many mothers-in-law. That's the problem with the Mormons. In any event, at the end of the semester, the professor had a brilliant idea. Instead of having chazara for the final, he decided to invite a shliach from each of the 5 religions to come into the class and prove to the class that their religion is emes, the other 4 is sheker, and they're all going to Gehenna if they don't follow their religion. So he invited in a Christian, he invited in a Muslim, he invited in a Harry, he invited in a Mormon, and somehow I represented the Jewish religion. How? So there was 1 Jewish kid in the class named Stephen. So the professor goes over to Stephen. He says, do me a favor, find for me a rabbi. It happens to be this Stephen has a father who is a very, very wealthy man, and he had made significant donations to our organization. So I get a call from the father on his satellite phone, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, on his yacht. He's off the coast of California, 5 minutes before lichbenching, telling me I'm going to Princeton to teach Torah. Now, I really wasn't so interested, but, the donations were there, and I kind of felt an obligation. The problem is, there is a halacha that you're not allowed to teach, Gentiles Torah except for the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So what would happen if I would show up and Stephen, the only Jewish kid in the class, wouldn't be there? So I told the father, I will come. I'd like to be last. That's a request. The Kachave, I was last. I was on Friday. Everyone else came Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I came Erev Shabbos Kodesh. I was supposed to speak for an hour. They kept me for about 2 hours. And my second issue was my demand that I told the father that his son better be there. I don't care how ill he is. Get Hatzalah, hook him up, wheel him in. I needed the Jewish kid there. The Kachave. And I spoke. And I came in and Stephen was there. To make a long story short, here we are 20 years later. Stephen stopped using his English name Stephen long time ago. Now he goes by his name Shalom. He's a Baal Tshuva. He is married, Kinderlach, and he's plowing through Shas. And his father hates me. Kidding, he doesn't hate me. He's got some nachas. Still gives us our donations, but he was concerned in the beginning, and Baruch Hashem, he's happy. What did I say in Princeton? I said a lot. It was 2 hours. But the basic idea that I presented to them is the same idea that our children need to know in order that they can articulate that we have a Torah's emes. And it is now the Yontif of Pesach, and afterwards Shavuos. This is the Yontif of Emunah, of passing on the truth of our Torah and the Masorah. So this is very, very appropriate now. came into Princeton, and I had these 50 kids there, and I asked them, how did the other four religions that were here this week, how did they begin? And I imagine that most of our listeners know this. And I ask all of you to go and look at the Hagdama of the Sefer HaChinuch. He says, everything we are saying here, as a lot of the Sifrei Rishonim and Achronim discuss. And that is the other four religions, and in fact, every religion in the world, all began exactly the same way, with one person claiming a private revelation and a discussion with God, how God appeared to them, or God gave them a book, or God told them they're the Mashiach, but no Eidim, not a single religion in the world. There have been approximately 15,000 recorded religions since Avram Avinu until today. And 14,999 of them basically all begin exactly the same way, where one person claims that God spoke to them or appeared to them with no Eidim, no witnesses. And this is what I said, and this is what was going on in Princeton. And we were discussing this, and they were mamish making chayzik of me. How all religions are nonsense. The kids were making chayzik. Each religion says, my religion is the true religion. My prophet's the true prophet. Until finally I said to them, I could have said to them, well, how did Judaism start? But I wanted to demonstrate something to them about the professor. I wanted to embarrass him a tiny, tiny bit. Why? The professor's he's got 2 PhDs. He's making $150,000 a year. And the rabbi has no PhDs. He owes $150,000. And l'chorah, he may know more than the professor. So the way I presented it to them there in Princeton was, what did the professor teach you about the beginning of Judaism? Because I knew they're going to give me the wrong answer. But kachave, a young lady in the audience raised her hand and said, well, the professor taught us that according to Judaism, God gave the book to Moses. And I had an overhead projector and a screen, and the psukim had slides with the psukim on them. And I just read to them psukim for 5 minutes. Read the psukim, Ki b'yom hashlishi, Yered Hashem le'enei kol ha'am al har Sinai. Kol ha'am, not le'enei Moshe. That Hashem appeared to the entire nation. The next pasuk, Vayechrad kol ha'am. Next pasuk, Vayotze Moshe es ha'am l'kras Elokim. And I showed them in 50 places, 50 psukim, nation. That the Hashem appeared in front of the entire nation. And this young lady raised her hand and said, are you saying that according to Judaism, God gave it to a bunch of people? So I looked at her and I said, I wouldn't say a bunch. I would say 3 million men, women, and children who happened to be my grandparents, and they passed it down to me through a Passover seder. And you know what this young lady said to me? It happened to be a girl from China, hopefully without the corona. And she said to me, Rabbi, does the world know about this? And I laughed. I said, no, the world doesn't. Because the world has no idea what happened on Har Sinai, how the Torah describes it. And this is very important for our children to realize the utter uniqueness of Klal Yisrael's claim. Everyone is one person, we're 3 million. What's the difference? One person is a suffix. 3 million is a vadai. 3 million is an historical event. We're not a religion. We are an historical event. Just like any event in history. Just like we know there was a man named Rashi. There was a man named the Vilna Gaon and the Baal Shem Tov. There's zero suffix on that. These are historical events because they were witnessed by millions or hundreds of thousands of witnesses who then passed it on. And in Goyshe history, there was a civil war. There was a president of the United States named Abraham Lincoln. These are historical events with no suffix. So too Yiddishkeit is an historical event. We are utterly and categorically different than every other claim. And how did Hashem pass this down? Many kids, they have difficulty relating to an event that happened 3,332 years ago. I don't even remember what I did last Chol Hamoed with my grandchildren. So look what the Eibishter did. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a way that even though the Torah was given 3,300 years ago, it's Ki'ilu, we were just there. And he passed it down to us through a way that no other nation or culture ever in history had. And it's called the Pesach Seder. Through the Pesach Seder. Of course, besides all the times we say Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim, and Mezuzahs, and Tefillin, and Sukkah, etc., etc. The Pesach Seder, the Iker of giving over the Chinuch of our Messiah back to Har Sinai. And I've pointed out to kids a fascinating idea. I asked them, how many Pesach Sedarim do they think have taken place in their families between them now and Yetzias Mitzrayim and Har Sinai? It's important to understand the way I say it. How many Pesach Sedarim in their family has taken place between now and Yetzias Mitzrayim and Maimed Har Sinai? And the answer is approximately 40. The kids will tell me 3,000, 2,000. When I tell them 40, it blows them away. It should blow all of us away. How do we get 40? Around 40, approximately, because we're talking generations. And I tell the kids, and I tell you a story that happened to me. When I was 4 years old, which was a long time ago, 1964, 56 years ago, you could do the math. When I was 4 years old, I was at a seder with my family and my Zaidi, my 92-year-old Zaidi, who was a Slonomer Chassid. And at some point during the seder, I was left alone with my Zaidi in a room. It was a long time ago, I assume. It was during Rachza when everybody goes to wash, and the Kinderlach stay back to steal the Afikaimen. And there I was with my grandfather, my Zaidi, alone in the room. And my 92-year-old Zaidi with his kittel and streimel walks over. He grabs my hand, my wrist, my right wrist. I was 4 years old. And in Yiddish, my Zaidi said to me the following words. His exact words, the exact intonation, and the exact way he pronounced the Lashon HaKodesh. He said to me, Daniel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim and gave us a Torah. And then my 92-year-old Zaidi bent down and whispered in my ear. And when I was 4 years old in 1877, my Zaidi from 1795 did the exact same thing to me that I'm doing to you. 2 Sedarim in my family, really 3. 3 Sedarim in my family, I'm in 1795. And when that Zaidi was 4 years old in 1701, his Zaidi from 1605 did the same thing to him. 4 Pesach Sedarim in the mechanic family. I'm in the early 1600s. Another, 5, 6, 7 more, and we're at the time of Rashi, the Rashba, the Ritva, the Rishonim. Just take it back. It's about 40 Sedarim, 41, 42, 40. Every one of us, when we were 3 years old, we had a Pesach Seder. And at that Seder was an elderly Zaidi, Bubby, aunt, uncle, or an old Haggadah, telling us that when they were little kids, 3 years old, they were at a Seder with their 90-year-old Zaidi, who did the same thing to them. So, knowing that we have the emes, and then we have a Torah emes, and obviously I've shortened it tremendously. This is a 3-hour presentation that we do in schools or in Kiruv seminars. But when our children know that we have the emes, that Torah is emes, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, keep Shabbos. This is the right way to lead your life. It is a major weapon in our arsenal to fight the Yetzer Hara and the apathy and the lack of passion that we see in many of our kids today. And we have to project confidence in Torah's emes, in the truth of Torah. We have to project confidence. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with a very famous person in the secular world in a restaurant in California, Pat's Restaurant on Pico Boulevard, for those of you who know, with a very, very famous person who wanted to talk or perhaps debate with me Judaism, a completely assimilated Jew. And we sat down, we walked into this restaurant. He had two bodyguards with him. I was getting a lot of attention. Everyone was wondering him. They knew who he was. Me, they didn't know. And we sat down, me and him. And I must tell you, even though I consider myself a Ben Torah, sitting with this person took my breath away. People would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to sit with him for half an hour. And mechanic is sitting with this person. It's a long story I'm not going to get into now. And we sit down, and as we're getting ready to order our meal, we just started. He just looks at me and he says, "So, Rabbi, how do you know God exists?" Just like that. It's like nuclear weapon right off the bat. The question. So we have to show confidence. So I looked at him and I said, "How do you know he does not exist?" He was irate. He got so angry. He said to me, "You're such a Jew. I bring you out from New York to answer my questions, and what do? You answer me with a question. So I'm asking you, Rabbi, how do you know God exists?" So I look at him, and with confidence, I say it again. How do you know he does not? And he's just staring at me. And then I said the following argument, a very powerful argument, an argument that comes from confidence in the emes of Yiddishkeit. I looked at him and I said, "Well, you have a problem. Not me and the believing Jews, we don't have a problem, but you have a problem. And let me tell you why. Because one of us is right and one of us is wrong. There is no third possibility. Either I'm right, there's an Eibishter who created this world, and therefore there's a tachlis achaim, there's a purpose in life. Or you're right, chas v'shalom, and there is no Eibishter chas v'shalom. And when we and there's no purpose to life and nothing, and we've always been here." He goes, "Yeah." I go, "When are we going to find out who's right and who's wrong?" He understood. When are we going to find out who's 100% who's right and who's wrong? The second we die. So we're going to live till 120, I said to him, and then we're going to both die. Either I'm right, pass away at 120, and there's Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe Rabbeinu, my Bubby. Or you're right, I said to him, and we die at 120, and nothing. The whole thing was nonsense. We Orthodox Jews were wrong. He's like listening. And I go, let's look at the consequences of who's right and who's wrong. Let's say I and all the Frumma Yidden, we turn out to be wrong. Again, Chas v'shalom. I said, what did I lose out in life? I spent an entire life absolutely convinced that I'm right, and Torah's emes, and had structure in my life, and meaning, and purpose, and spirituality, and chalent. So what did I lose out? There's a few averos I didn't do. But let's take a look at you. You're going to live out your whole life as an atheist, and then you die. And let's say you're wrong, and there's Hashem. What are you going to say for eternity? Oops. If you're wrong, the consequences are catastrophic. I mean, you can't judge him. He's a total Tinuk Shanishba, knows nothing. That's for Hashem. But he missed out on life. He missed out on the purpose of life. He missed out on the relationship with Hashem. So I told him the consequences of you being wrong are catastrophic. The consequences of me being wrong are, so a few sins I didn't do. I said, and therefore, here's the point. Because this doesn't prove anything. It just proves to him the following point. Therefore, since the consequences are so catastrophic for you. If you're wrong, you better do your research. You want to know if Hashem exists? And I pulled out a few books that I brought along. Some books, famous books, Permission to Believe, and If You Were God by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, a third book, and I issued a challenge. I said, you read these books. If you could read these books and you find the flaw in Judaism and belief in Hashem, I'll go off the Derech. If you could find the flaw. That's a real powerful challenge. And it came from confidence. I met with him a few more times until his wife convinced him that I'm some type of cult, and he no longer met with me. But this is something that we have to do. We have to always be confident in Frumkeit, in the belief in Hashem and belief in Torah. I go into schools. And many, many years ago, I went into a school for boys who were parents were from the former Soviet Union. So I'm about to speak to these boys for 3 hours. I think they would rather be at a dentist having a root canal than listen to Rabbi Mechanic talk Torah for 3 hours. So I came in there, I told them a few stories, and Baruch Hashem had them in the palm of my hand because the Torah is Gavaldik and Emes. But the principal had warned me about one boy named Michael, a 12th grader, 6'4", 240 pounds, who the principal told me was an apikairis and an Eloi, real apikairis. So you have to be confident. So I gave my whole presentation showing the truth of Torah. I waited for the apikairis to ask me questions. He didn't ask me a single question. When it was all done, he came at me with his friends. And he walks over to me, and all the boys all came back in the room. They're all surrounding us. They're waiting for this moment, World War III, between Rabbi Mechanic and their local atheist, this 17-year-old boy. And he says to me, Rabbi, I listened to everything you said, and nothing was true. You're not telling the truth, and there is no Eibishter. It's not true. This whole thing is not true. I said, so who made the world then? Where did the world come from? So he says to me, it's always been here. I said, that's fascinating. Would you like to have a debate about this? He goes, would I like to have a debate? I've been looking for a guy like you for years. I said, okay, let's have a debate. So I kicked everybody out. I sent back the boys to the room because I'm about to embarrass him. And you don't embarrass a boy in front of his friends. And I pulled him into a room. I said, so tell me, you don't believe in Hashem? He goes, no. Do you believe in the Torah? No. Do you believe in Olam Haba? No. I said, so you don't believe in anything? I said, okay. Do you mind if I'm going to have a debate with you, but I need to ask you a few questions first, and then we'll have our debate. So you are claiming to be an atheist and apikairos. Did you ever read anything from Aristotle, greatest non-Jewish philosopher of all time? The Rambam mentions him, the Moreh Nevuchim. Did you ever read anything from Aristotle, wrote books about God's existence? He goes, no. I go, you never read anything from Aristotle? He goes, no. I go, what about Socrates and Plato? He's like, no. I said to him, maybe you just like, the Jews. There was a man named the Rambam. He wrote a sefer called the Moreh Nevuchim. It's translated to English. It's called The Guide to the Perplexed. Just curious, did you ever read anything from there, from the Moreh Nevuchim? No. Did you ever read the first 40 pages of the Chovos HaLevavos? It's called the Shar HaYichud, a very powerful proof of Hashem's existence? No. Tell me, did you ever read the Kuzari? Rabbi Yehuda Levi wrote a sefer, a book, demonstrating the authenticity of Torah Misinai? No. Did you ever read Camus, Nietzsche, Spinoza, David Hume, Heschel, some other words I came up with? He never read anything. So I put my arm around his shoulder, and I said, Michael, you are not an atheist. You're an ignoramus. You don't know anything. You can't even be a good apikairos. You don't know enough to be an apikairos. I told him, you should have told me you hate your Rebbeim. Okay, have a relationship with me. You like Rebbeim. Tell me you're bored Shabbos. You're bored. Come to me for Shabbos. You won't be bored. Tell me you don't like davening. Yeah, go to the Vasikin minyan by the Kaisel. Boy, you'll love davening. But don't tell me you don't believe in Hashem when you know nothing about it. You call the bluff. Because 95, 98% of the time when people say, I don't believe this, I think this is ridiculous, I think this and I think that is wrong. They've done no research. And that's how you demonstrate confidence in Torah Semis. Okay, so we have 5 more minutes. I was once on my way back from a trip from California to New York, and I had to stop through Denver, but there was a snowstorm in Denver, and I was redirected to Salt Lake City. So this is many years ago. There I was, there was no phones, there was no food in Salt Lake City with an OU on it. I was there for hours. And I was stuck in this airport, and I noticed, some Mormons giving out their literature. And they come over to me and they start up with me. And I told them the following. I showed confidence. I said, and I heard this story from Noach Weinberg, Zatzal, from Rav Yaakov Weinberg, Zatzal, the Rosh of Bnei Yisrael. Both of them told me that this story they saw in a sefer. And this is a story that I told to the Mormons, the missionaries, and it shows the confidence that we have in the emes of Torah. I said like this: there was once a Hasidic Rebbe. He had 50,000 followers. One day the Rebbe was suddenly nifter, and for whatever reason there was no tzavah, there was no will. And the problem was that he had 3 sons, and it was very unclear in the community who should be the next Rebbe. So thousands felt that it's appropriate the Bechor should be the next Rebbe. Others said, yeah, but the middle son is a humongous Talmud Chacham. Everyone knows he knows Kala Torah Kula. He's the appropriate one to take over as Rebbe. Others said, yeah, but everyone loves the younger son. He's the most charismatic. He's a Baal Eitzah. He has Chachma and wisdom. He should be the next Rebbe. So Shemana Machlokas broke out, and after Shiva, one day the youngest son summons everybody to the Beis Medrash. This is the story I told over to the Mormons. I changed it a little differently so that they'll understand. They don't know what a Beis Medrash is. So one day the youngest son summons everybody to the Beis Medrash, and he says, I know who the next Rebbe is going to be. It's going to be me, because I had a dream last night, and the Rebbe came to me and told me that I'm the next Rebbe. So I asked these missionaries, what could they say that would logically disprove what the son is saying? He's not lying. He had this dream, but we cannot rely on him. And they realized, well, it would have made more sense if the Rebbe in heaven had appeared to all 3 sons. And then I asked, what would have been the best way of all? And it took them a few minutes, and they realized the best way of all is if the Rebbe would have appeared in the Chaloimus of all 50,000 Chassidim. Then they would know Vadai who's supposed to be the next Rebbe. It's the only logical way to do it. And that's when I said, you just disproved your religion of Mormonism, where you claim that God appeared to your prophet. Why would he do that? He would appear to all the Mormons, to all a mass revelation. And these are things that we have to have in our arsenal to be able to demonstrate to our children and pass on a Masorah, that we have a Torah's emes, that it's true, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a Torah. And if Yiddishkeit is on offense and is scoring points, as they say, the outside world won't have a chance. Our children must know with the absolute conviction that we, the Am HaNivcher, we have a Torah's emes, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, and we have to show it to them through our Masorah back to Har Sinai. And this is what Emunah Pshuta really is, as Rav Yaakov Weinberg once told me. Emunah Pshuta means it's Pashut. My father had a seder and his father had a seder, going back 40, 50 Siddharim to Har Sinai, a Masorah. And this is what we have to give over to our children. And then we need to daven a lot of davening and schosavos. And if we do all that, we can be assured that Be'ezus Hashem, our children will love Hashem and love Torah and love Klal Yisrael. And I invite you all to come again, Amir Hashem, next week on Tuesday, where we will talk about the second Amud HaChinuch, which is Torah's Chaim, and demonstrate to them the beauty of leading a frum lifestyle. We should all be Zoicha that our children remain on the Derech HaYashar, and we should all learn from this tremendous Nisayan that we are all going through together and learn our lessons from it. And one of them is when we're with our children to improve our chinuch skills. And that is with these three Amudei HaChinuch. Thank you. Good night.